They called it a dream trip. White sands, turquoise water, and a villa carved straight out of a fantasy. A newlywed couple. A fresh beginning. And a father who shouldn't have been there. From the outside, everything looked perfect. A young bride glowing with love. A husband successful and adored. A father proud, maybe too proud. But sometimes, paradise hides poison. Sometimes, the most beautiful places hold the darkest secrets. She thought she was going to reconnect with her husband. Instead, she discovered someone else was watching. Listening. Waiting. A kiss never meant to happen. A pregnancy no one could explain. A betrayal deeper than blood. And in the end, a man would lie still, cold, and silent. While two others stood staring at a future they never imagined. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's not just a love triangle. This is the kind of story that rips through families. The kind no one wants to believe. The kind that ends in tragedy. But before we get to the blood, before the secrets spilled like wine across marble floors, before death arrived at the doorstep of a dream, let me take you back to where it all began. To the moment the plane touched down in Montego Bay. And the perfect picture started to crack. Before the blood. Before the secrets, the whispers, the shattered glass and broken vows. There was a love story. Or at least, the illusion of one. Kareem Morgan was the kind of man who turned heads when he walked into a room. Not just because he was tall, sharply dressed, or devastatingly handsome, though he was all those things. But because he moved like someone who was born into power. And had learned early how to use it. The son of real estate tycoon Luther Morgan, Kareem never had to fight for a seat at the table. He owned the table before he ever turned 25. Educated in London. Interned on Wall Street. By 29, he was already running major financial portfolios in Kingston. The golden boy of Jamaican high society. But what no one saw, what no one dared to ask, was what hid beneath the polished exterior. The rehearsed smiles. The designer watches. The quick temper that flared behind closed doors. And the silence, the long, suffocating silence when things didn't go his way. They say he never truly recovered from losing his mother. She died when Kareem was just 13. Cancer. Quick. Brutal. Luther never spoke of her again. And Kareem, in turn, learned to bury emotion the way his father taught him. Deep beneath ambition, beneath work, beneath layers of unspoken pain. He became a man who calculated feelings like spreadsheets. Love, to Kareem, was a transaction. Something to manage, to control, to package neatly into a beautiful life. And that's where Shanice came in. Shanice Thompson was everything Kareem was not. She didn't come from mansions or marble floors. She didn't have chauffeurs or prep schools. She came from Portmore. Raised by a single mother who scrubbed office buildings at night. And sold coconut drops by day to put food on the table. A girl who knew how to stretch $5 across 3 days. Who understood the weight of sacrifice before she even turned 10. But what Shanice lacked in wealth, she made up for in grace. She walked with quiet confidence. She smiled like she'd survived storms and still believed in rainbows. By 26, she had earned a degree in communications on a scholarship. Worked as a junior PR consultant at a boutique agency in Kingston. And dreamed, not of riches or status, but of building a real life. A love that felt safe. A family rooted in honesty. A husband who made her feel seen. And when she met Kareem at a charity gala 2 years earlier, she believed, with all her heart, that she had found him. He was dazzling that night. He spoke with charm, flirted without arrogance, and listened just long enough to make her feel like she mattered. He told her she was beautiful. But more than that, he said she was different. That word rang in her ears for weeks. The relationship moved fast. Weekend trips to Ocho Rios. Surprise gifts, jewelry, new dresses, imported perfume. Fancy dinners where he introduced her to Kingston's elite as, my future queen. It felt like a fairy tale. But like most fairy tales, it wasn't entirely real. Behind the lavish lifestyle were warning signs. Kareem's sharp tongue during disagreements. His habit of disappearing for hours with no explanation. The way he could shut down emotionally like flipping a switch. He never raised his hand. But sometimes, he didn't need to. His silence could bruise in places no one could see. Shanice excused it all. She told herself he was under pressure. Deals, investors, legacy. That once they were married, once the dust settled, things would get better. More time. More attention. More love. She wanted to believe in his potential more than she trusted his reality. Then came the wedding. It was the event of the year. Held at a private estate in the Blue Mountains. Crystal chandeliers under the stars. Celebrity chefs. A string quartet. Influencers documented every angle on Instagram with envy. But beneath the glitter, Shanice felt a strange emptiness. On their wedding night, Kareem got drunk with his groomsmen and passed out cold. She spent the evening alone on the hotel balcony. Staring at the ring on her finger, wondering what it truly meant. Still, she clung to hope. The trip to Montego Bay was supposed to be their reset. A chance to reconnect. To remember why they said, I do, in the first place. They boarded the flight with hand luggage and heavy baggage. The kind that doesn't get checked. But always shows up at your destination. And then, there was Luther. Luther Morgan. Patriarch. Businessman. A man of quiet power, calculated charm, and eyes that saw too much. He was in his mid-50s. Still fit, with a commanding presence. The kind of man who entered a room and changed its temperature. He had paid for everything. The luxury villa. The private chef. The yacht excursions. He insisted it was a family bonding experience. A gift. A gesture of generosity. But Shanice wasn't sure. She had only met him a few times before the wedding. He had been warm. Polite. But there was something behind his smile. A pause too long, a glance too low, a charm too slick. She couldn't name it. But she felt it. A ripple beneath the surface. Kareem, of course, brushed it off. Come on, babe, he said, flashing his famous grin. He just wants to spend time with us. Trust me, it'll be amazing. So she trusted him. The villa was breathtaking. 2 stories of modern design nestled between palm trees. With a view of the Caribbean Sea so perfect it didn't seem real. Sea salt in the air. Hibiscus blooming along the walkways. Waves crashing gently like a lullaby just beyond the balcony. For the first few days, it truly was paradise. Rum cocktails. Snorkeling trips. Candlelit dinners by the sea. And Luther, surprisingly, kept his distance. Golfed with resort executives. Read by the pool. Smiled politely at meals. Shanice even began to let her guard down. She told herself she had been paranoid. That maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something beautiful. She didn't know. That something else had already begun. Something that would change everything. A story not just of passion. But of power. Of betrayal. Of choices made in the silence. And the price paid in blood. They say marriages don't collapse overnight. They erode, grain by grain, moment by moment. And in the villa that overlooked Montego Bay's perfect shore, the decay had already begun. By the 4th day of the trip, something had shifted. Kareem, ever the workaholic, was back in his element. Emails. Zoom calls. Investor meetings. He spent more time locked inside the villa's office than outside enjoying the sun. He told Shanice he was finalizing a deal. Just one last thing before we can truly unwind, he said. But last things kept multiplying. Breakfasts passed without him. Sunsets came and went with her standing alone on the balcony, wine glass in hand. She had packed new dresses, soft lingerie, scented oils. All untouched. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't violent. He was simply absent. And sometimes, that's worse. Because absence isn't always empty. Sometimes it makes room for something else. Or someone. Luther began to fill that space, quietly, methodically. What started as innocent gestures felt harmless at first. A shared breakfast while Kareem was on a call. A soft compliment about her dress. A question about her favorite music. He listened when she spoke. Really listened. Not the way Kareem did, halfway, distracted. But fully, with eyes that didn't drift to a phone screen. Eyes that saw her. At first, she resisted it. Told herself she was imagining things. That it was just kindness. That she was overreacting. But then came the conversations. Deeper ones. Personal ones. On the balcony one morning, over coffee, Luther looked out at the sea and said softly. Marriage changes people. Sometimes it brings them closer. Sometimes, it just makes the cracks harder to ignore. Shanice didn't respond. She didn't need to. Because inside her, something shifted. A recognition. A flicker of truth she had tried hard to suppress. She had tried. God knows she had tried. To be the supportive wife. To smile when it hurt. To believe that if she just held on a little longer, Kareem would turn back into the man who once made her feel like the only woman in the room. But now, the room was empty. And Luther had walked in. It started with stolen glances. Then came proximity. A soft touch here. A hand lingering a second too long there. Words that dripped with layered meaning, like honey over poison. You remind me of my late wife, Luther said one afternoon. She had your fire, quiet, but powerful. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did. Because Shanice had never heard Kareem say anything like that. Not since the wedding. Maybe not ever. And slowly, curiosity became comfort. Comfort became temptation. Temptation, desire. One hot afternoon, the villa's air conditioning failed. The Jamaican sun pressed down like a second skin. Shanice, sweaty and tired, slipped into a thin white sundress, barefoot and glowing from sea salt and heat. She walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water. Luther was already there. Shirtless. Linen pants hanging low on his hips. Coffee in hand. Their eyes met. Held. She froze. I didn't know you were in here, she said, adjusting the strap of her dress. No need to apologize, he said, voice low, almost a whisper. You look peaceful. She laughed nervously. More like exhausted. He stepped forward. Brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. You wear it beautifully, he whispered. You deserve to be seen. And then, the kiss. Not rushed. Not clumsy. But deliberate. Certain. Their lips met for only a few seconds. But it was long enough to set fire to everything. Shanice gasped. Stepped back. Her fingers trembled as they touched her lips. I can't. Luther nodded. Of course, forgive me. She fled the room. Locked herself in the bathroom. Stared at her reflection, flushed, breathless, and terrified. What had just happened? What had she allowed to happen? But beneath the fear, was something else. Desire. A fire she didn't know was still inside her. One that Kareem had left to smolder unattended. That night, Kareem didn't even ask where she had been. Didn't notice the shift in her gaze. The tension in her shoulders. The guilt tucked beneath her silence. He was too busy reviewing numbers on his laptop. Too distracted to feel his marriage slipping through his fingers. Shanice lay beside him in bed, eyes open. The kiss replaying again and again. Not just the moment, but how alive she had felt. In the days that followed, it became an unspoken rhythm. A new current beneath the surface. They didn't talk about the kiss. They didn't need to. Everything had changed. The way they looked at each other. The way their voices softened in private moments. The charged silence between them whenever Kareem was in the next room. Each touch, each whisper, each lingering glance became bolder. Until the night it happened again. It was humid. A Wednesday. Kareem had stormed out after a business call gone bad. Didn't say where he was going. Just slammed the door and vanished into the dark. Shanice stood in the doorway, stunned. Tears welled up, chest heaving. Luther appeared behind her. Steady. Concerned. Are you okay? She turned. Shook her head. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. He pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist. His embrace was warm, safe. I can't keep pretending, she whispered. Then don't. Their lips met again. This time harder. Desperate. Clothes were shed. Lines were crossed. The guest bedroom swallowed them whole. And in that hour, the world ceased to exist. They lay together in silence. The sound of waves crashing outside. A storm echoed the one now raging within them. But they didn't know that Kareem had returned early. That he was standing just outside the door. That he heard everything. His wife. His father. Together. In his bed. Something inside him broke. Snapped clean in two. But he didn't speak. Not yet. He waited. He watched. And while Shanice and Luther fell deeper into their affair. Midnight rendezvous, stolen moments in the sauna, urgent trysts beneath moonlight. Kareem was unraveling in silence. He read deleted messages. Watched glances exchanged at dinner. He smelled guilt like smoke in a burning house. And when Shanice missed her period. When the pregnancy test turned positive. When she whispered to Luther about raising the baby together. He knew. He didn't ask. He didn't confront. He just listened. And let the storm build. Because betrayal that deep doesn't fade. It festers. And one day, it explodes. The seal had been broken. The blood was coming. And none of them, not Shanice, not Luther, not even Kareem, could stop what was already in motion. By the time most betrayals are discovered, the damage is already done. But in Kareem Morgan's case, he didn't discover the affair all at once. He heard it. He stood in the hallway outside the guest room, heart hammering. As muffled voices turned to breathless moans. As whispers of comfort turned to sounds he couldn't unhear. He had come back early, intending to apologize for the fight. To hold his wife again. To maybe, finally, reconnect. But instead, he stood paralyzed. A man eavesdropping on the crumbling of his entire world. His wife. His father. Their betrayal wasn't just physical. It was generational. It was spiritual. It tore through his bloodline like rot through wood. Kareem didn't say a word. He didn't kick down the door. Didn't yell. Didn't cry. He walked away. Silently. But something inside him shattered. And the man who returned to the villa that night was not the same man who had boarded that plane 10 days earlier. Over the next few days, Kareem became a ghost. Silent. Polite. Unnervingly still. He kept up appearances. Shared meals. Nodded through conversations. Smiled for photos. But his eyes were gone. Behind the surface, his mind was spiraling. Questions that had no answers. Scenes that replayed like a film on loop. What did he miss? When did it start? How long had they been laughing at him behind his back? And worse, why didn't he stop it? He started watching them. Not obviously, but closely. A sideways glance at the dinner table. A long stare as they walked too close on the beach. He began to see things he once ignored. The way Shanice's voice softened when she spoke to Luther. The way Luther's hand lingered just a second too long on her lower back. The subtle avoidance of eye contact when all three were in the same room. And suddenly, everything made sense. The missed dinners. The late-night swims. The shared jokes that excluded him. He felt like a stranger in his own marriage. And in his own family. At night, he couldn't sleep. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind chasing shadows across the villa's white walls. He began drinking. Not socially. Not for pleasure. But for sedation. To silence the noise. Rum by noon. Whiskey by dusk. Something stronger when the memories were too loud. He stopped eating. His face grew pale, his eyes sunken. But no one said a word. Because no one noticed. They were too busy pretending. One evening, after another silent dinner, Kareem stepped out onto the back patio and made a phone call. Not to Shanice. Not to Luther. But to the one person who knew him better than anyone still alive. His childhood friend and business assistant, Jaleel Watson. Jaleel had grown up in Kingston with Kareem. Gone to school with him. Worked side by side with him since university. He had seen Kareem at his most brilliant. And at his most broken. Yo, Jaleel answered, voice groggy from sleep. I need to talk, Kareem said, hoarse. There was a long pause. You sound like hell, bro. I'm in hell. They spoke for hours. Kareem didn't give full details. Not yet. But he hinted. They're not who I thought they were, he said. It's like I'm watching my life fall apart in real time. Talk to her, Jaleel advised. Talk to him. Do something before this thing eats you alive. But Kareem didn't want confrontation. Not yet. He wanted confirmation. He needed evidence. So he began searching. When Shanice fell asleep, he slipped out of bed and checked her phone. Nothing. No texts. No call logs. It was too clean. Too perfect. He opened her email. Empty drafts folder. No sent messages to Luther. Even her trash had been wiped. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. She wasn't just cheating on him. She was hiding it. Which meant she knew it was wrong. Which meant she chose it anyway. Then came the final crack. One morning, Shanice left to get a massage at the resort spa. Kareem was in the bathroom, brushing his teeth, when he opened the bottom drawer looking for toothpaste. And found it. A small, plastic stick. Tucked behind travel-sized lotion bottles and a half-empty box of tampons. He picked it up with trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Clear as day. Pregnant. His mind went blank. Not from shock. But from certainty. He and Shanice hadn't been intimate in weeks. Maybe longer. The baby wasn't his. He sat on the edge of the bathtub for a long time. The test in his hand. His world dissolving. He didn't cry. Didn't scream. He laughed. A low, bitter, broken laugh that echoed off the marble walls like a curse. That night, he stood in the hallway again. Watched Shanice from the shadows. She was out on the balcony whispering on the phone. Her hand resting gently on her stomach. She smiled. A soft, maternal smile. A smile she had never shown him. Not once. And in that moment, Kareem understood something he never wanted to believe. The life he thought he had built was gone. The wife he married never truly belonged to him. The father who raised him had betrayed him in the most unspeakable way. And the child now growing in the villa carried a legacy that wasn't his. From that night on, something changed inside him. He stopped calling Jaleel. Stopped trying to make sense of things. Stopped trying to save what had already drowned. He became still. Dangerously still. The kind of stillness that comes before the quake. Before the storm. Before the moment a man decides enough is enough. What came next was not a confrontation. It was a reckoning. There are moments in a man's life that split his soul in two. Before and after. Light and shadow. Sanity, and the storm that swallows it. For Kareem Morgan, that moment came on the 10th night in Montego Bay. He had stopped pretending. Stopped smiling. Stopped asking why. He had crossed through grief and landed in something colder. More final. Not rage. Not even heartbreak. Resolve. That night, he sat by the pool alone. A half-empty bottle of rum on the glass table beside him. In his hand, an old family photo, creased at the corners, smudged with time. It was taken beneath a mango tree in Kingston. Kareem was just a boy, maybe 8, smiling wide with missing teeth. His mother beside him, her arm draped lovingly around his shoulder. And Luther, standing tall behind them, his hand resting protectively on both their backs. A father. A husband. A king among men. Kareem stared at that photo like it was an artifact from a past life. A myth. Because now, it made him sick. He lit a match. Held it to the edge of the picture. The flames curled quickly, devouring smiles, memories, promises. Until all that remained were ashes, drifting into the humid Caribbean night. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. Kareem walked straight to the guest room and opened the door. Luther was inside, awake. Sitting in a chair by the window, nursing a glass of brandy. Their eyes met. The room stood still. "Something wrong, son?" Luther asked, cautious. Kareem stepped in, closed the door quietly behind him. He didn't blink. "You knew how unhappy we were," he said slowly. "You watched our marriage fall apart. You gave me advice. Told me to fight for her. All the while, you were waiting to take my place." Luther stood, setting the glass down gently. "It wasn't like that." Kareem's voice cracked. "Then tell me what it was like. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you stole my wife. And got her pregnant." A long silence. Luther's jaw tightened. His voice low, regretful. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." That phrase, "it just happened," was the match to the fuse. Kareem lunged. The first punch came fast, snapping Luther's head sideways. A crash. Glass shattered. The lamp on the nightstand went flying. Luther retaliated, pushing Kareem off. But Kareem came back harder. Fists clenched. Grief erupting as fury. This wasn't a fight. It was a reckoning. Years of repressed emotion. Rage from a mother's death. Pain from a hollow marriage. Betrayal so deep it infected the bone. "You were supposed to protect me." Kareem screamed. "You were my father." They slammed into the dresser. Blood splattered across the white bedsheets. Luther gasped as Kareem struck again, jaw, ribs, shoulder. But Luther was still strong. He grabbed Kareem by the collar, shoving him backward against the wall. Both men were panting, bleeding, half sobbing. Two lions, locked in a death spiral. Love long gone. Honor long dead. Shanice ran in. Barefoot. Eyes wide. A scream caught in her throat. She froze. Kareem stood over his father, knuckles raw, blood on his shirt. Tears streaming down his face. Luther was slumped in the corner, his eyes swelling shut. His lips split and bleeding. Kareem turned to her. His eyes were wild. Broken. Haunted. Why? He whispered. Why him? Shanice's lip trembled. I don't know. The silence that followed was louder than the violence. Kareem looked at them both. Then staggered backward, grabbing the dresser for balance. It's all gone, he muttered. Everything. It's all gone. He walked out without another word. Down the hallway. Into the dark. That night, no one slept. Luther cleaned his wounds in silence. Shanice sat on the edge of the bed, shaking, staring into the void. The villa felt like a mausoleum. What had begun as a paradise was now a crime scene. And no one had even died, yet. At sunrise, Shanice woke to silence. The villa was eerily calm. Furniture still overturned. Blood still stained the guest room carpet. The air, heavy. Thick with dread. She hadn't seen Kareem all night. His room was locked. No lights. No sound. She paced the hall. Waited. Knocked gently. Kareem? Nothing. She knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. She tried the handle. Locked. Panic surged in her chest. Kareem, please, open the door. No response. She beat her fists against the wood. Please. Talk to me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Luther appeared behind her, his face swollen, pale. We should call someone. But Shanice had already forced the door open. It gave suddenly, swung wide with a loud creak. And then, silence. Kareem lay on the floor beside the bed. Still. Pale. An empty bottle of sleeping pills on the nightstand. A line of blood traced from his lips to the hardwood. His eyes, half open. Lifeless. Kareem! Shanice screamed, rushing forward, shaking him, begging, pleading. Wake up! Wake up! But it was too late. Luther stood frozen in the doorway, color draining from his face. He couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The son he had raised. The boy who once clung to his leg on the first day of school. Was gone. And deep down. He knew he was part of the reason. A wedding cake, once perfect. Melting in the sun. Its center collapsed. Luther's hand on Kareem's shoulder at the wedding. Dissolving like smoke. A family photo. Burning silently in the wind. Turning to ash. They called the police. The report was brief. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. No suicide note. Just a man. Broken by betrayal. A father's betrayal. A lover's betrayal. And a child. That would never call him Dad. The dream vacation was over. The illusion had cracked. And all that remained was the wreckage. One life lost. 3 lives shattered. And a silence that would echo long after the villa was emptied. The human heart has a strange way of breaking. Sometimes it shatters all at once. Sometimes, it splinters slowly, until there's nothing left to hold it together. When the police arrived at the villa, the air had already changed. There were no screams. No panic. Only silence. The kind of silence that hovers over a house like fog after a storm. They found Kareem's body precisely where Shanice had. Curled on the bedroom floor, eyes half open, lips stained with the trace of death. An empty bottle beside him. No weapon. No wounds. Just the unbearable stillness of a man who decided it hurt too much to live. The officers were professional. Cold. Efficient. They examined the room, questioned Luther and Shanice, took photos, made notes. And then, just like that, it was over. The preliminary report concluded what many already suspected. Suicide. No foul play. No conspiracy. Just a man pushed past the edge. But paperwork doesn't tell the truth. Not all of it. The full story lives in the eyes of the people left behind. For Shanice, grief didn't arrive in a single moment. It crept in like smoke. Thick. Slow. Suffocating. At first, it was shock. The image of Kareem's lifeless body burned into her brain like a photograph that wouldn't fade. Then came the guilt. It arrived like a flood, and it never left. She couldn't stop replaying it. Every word. Every kiss. Every lie. Her betrayal wasn't just an act of infidelity. It was the slow erosion of a man who had already been bleeding inside. In the weeks that followed, Shanice tried to hold on to what little remained. But everything was crumbling. Back in Kingston, the whispers started before she could even step out of the airport. First, it was the press. Tragic suicide of Jamaican financier Kareem Morgan. Inside the honeymoon that turned to horror. Then came the social media firestorm. People posted photos from the wedding. Glamorous images, now repurposed for clickbait and scandal. She was called a snake. A gold digger. A whore. And when the truth about the affair leaked, it spread like wildfire. Her family was the last to find out, but their pain cut the deepest. Her mother, who had scrubbed her hands raw so Shanice could go to college, stood in their living room with tears in her eyes and said, "You've disgraced us. You didn't just ruin your marriage. You destroyed a man." Her father, estranged for years, called just once. "I wasn't there for you as a child," he said, "but if this is the woman you've become, maybe that was a mercy." And then, nothing. Silence from both sides. No visits. No calls. Not even when she needed them most. Because 2 weeks after Kareem's funeral, Shanice began to show. She took the test again. Alone, this time. In a small bathroom, with trembling fingers. Still positive. Still irreversible. Inside her grew the consequence of everything she had done. A child. Innocent. Unwanted by fate. But undeniably real. When she told Luther, his reaction was unreadable. He stood quietly on her front steps, staring out at the Kingston skyline. "We'll figure it out," he said. "We'll do the right thing." But she could hear it in his voice. Something had changed. And within days, he was gone. No note. No explanation. No trace. Just, gone. The months passed slowly. Shanice hid the pregnancy from the public. Loose clothing. Isolation. She turned down interviews, ignored messages, locked the world out. She gave birth to a baby girl on a rainy Tuesday morning. No one came to the hospital. No flowers. No congratulations. Just a nurse, a cold room, and the overwhelming weight of a legacy she could never escape. She named the child Amara. A name that meant grace in her grandmother's tongue. A name she hoped could somehow rewrite the story she had written in blood and silence. Raising Amara was both a blessing and a curse. Every smile reminded her of Kareem's dimple. Every coo echoed Luther's voice. Every time the baby wrapped tiny fingers around hers. Shanice wondered if love could grow from shame. Luther never returned. Some said he fled the country. Others claimed he died alone in a coastal town. No confirmation. No closure. And part of Shanice was relieved. Because if she ever saw him again, she didn't know if she'd kiss him. Or kill him. Today, Shanice lives alone in a modest apartment back in Portmore. She works from home, freelance editing. Avoids crowds. Stays off the internet. The world has moved on. But she hasn't. Because true crime doesn't always end with a verdict. Or a prison sentence. Or justice. Sometimes, it ends with a woman alone in the dark. Holding a baby in one hand. And regret in the other. What began as a celebration of love ended in death, scandal, and silence. A child born of betrayal. A legacy shattered. And a question that will haunt everyone who knows the story. Was this tragedy inevitable? Or did love die the moment they landed in paradise?